Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Dill, a game that we're both fired up for. LSU heading on the road to play South Carolina. South Carolina starting the season 2-0, shocking a lot of people on Saturday afternoon, not just beating Kentucky, but going on the road and, lack of better terms, dominating Kentucky and an LSU team that I'm still really high on. Now, I think that USC team is a lot better than people gave them credit for. LSU certainly could have won that football game anyways. You're seeing Blake Baker make some improvements on the defensive side of the football. At the very least, it's a little bit more of an aggressive defense, which I think we both like. Want to get into, some key players, some key matchups, talk about what might win this football game for both sides. Now, before we get into it, as always, let it fly in the comment section. Dill, I don't even think we agree on this game pick, so we're going to have some back and forth. Would love for you guys to let it fly in the comment section as well. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And Dill, without further ado, let's start with this LSU offense versus the South Carolina defense. And I want to start with what I think is going to be a fascinating matchup. This LSU offensive line, specifically the offensive tackles, I think the best tackle duo that you see in the country, going up against the South Carolina edge rusher room in Kyle Kennard and Dylan Stewart that have been phenomenal the first 2 weeks. How do you see that matchup playing out? Because I look at it and say that's probably one of the bigger matchups that you're going to see on this football field.
Yeah, and I get looking at it from that pass pro standpoint, but I think what's going to set the tone is South Carolina's ability to stop the run, because that's still where I want to see it. And I think, again, you saw them getting after Kentucky on the edge. Those two, Kyle Kennard, Dylan Stewart, are starting to be real weapons. And if they can get pressure with the ability for them to take away the ball in the back end with those safeties and corners who really seem to have good instincts for that zone defense that South Carolina likes to run, that's where South Carolina gets dangerous. That's where they got obviously very dangerous against Kentucky. But I still want to see if they can, with a really physical team. And LSU, I know they didn't really run the ball against Nichols, but when you saw them get going against USC a couple times, like that offensive line can obviously make it happen. Those running backs, very good. I think Caleb Jackson needs to be more involved in this offense as they go forward. But that's where I'm going to be looking because, again, I have my questions, I think, about whether South Carolina's defense can really stand up physically for a whole game because they're good penetrators on the defensive line. And then those linebackers, to me, it feels like a much improved unit, but I still want to see them against probably their toughest test.
Well, 100%. Like the South Carolina front seven is a much improved unit. There's no question about it. That being said, it is against an LSU offensive line that we think is the best unit in the country. And you kind of noted something that, look, I know Gary Nussmeier's dog. Like, I think he's one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC and, quite frankly, one of the better quarterbacks in the country. I get you have dudes on the outside. It felt like LSU, especially against the USC team, kind of missed an opportunity to really just establish control of that football game and lean on their offensive line, which is one, extremely talented, more importantly, extremely experienced outside of the center position. Look, you're going on the road against what I think is a very good pass rush and quite frankly, a really good secondary. I think the best way you can kind of settle into this football game, it's going to be a rowdy environment, is get it going on the ground and try to build an early lead. Because you look at this South Carolina offense, it's not an offense that's meant to play from behind. If you can come in, get that run game going, build an early lead, if you're LSU, you like those chances there.
Yeah, that to me is where you can pick on this USC team because again, that's still where my questions are. And I do think the secondary is very good. And that's not to say LSU, they're not.
Well, that's a question to kind of cut you off is, all right, if the South Carolina starts walking up some safeties, can LSU work a little bit more vertically as well? Because I thought, quite frankly, that was another opportunity they could have had some more success against USC. Like, USC was walking safeties into the box pretty consistently, and, Nussmeier made some really good throws. I would have liked to ask a guy like CJ Daniels to work more vertically down the field and really try to hit some explosive plays if teams are going to start loading the box to stop this rushing attack. And you look at South Carolina, I think that's what they might do, right? LSU wants to run the football. If you get those safeties into the box, can you make them pay working vertically down the field? We all know Nussmeier can make those throws. I think CJ Daniels and company can make those catches. Can they kind of put that together and kind of play that complementary football? That's probably what I'm looking for now. Flipping the sides here, Blake Baker, LSU defense, going up against Lenore Sellers in South Carolina. My biggest matchup I'm looking at here is, can LSU win one-on-one on islands against South Carolina's wide receivers? We know the recipe for Blake Baker. He is going to be sending a lot of pressure, playing a lot of man coverage with not a lot of safety help. You look at USC, where they were able to have some successes, winning some of those one-on-one matchups, working vertically down the field. South Carolina, on the other point, Lenore Sellers looked pretty solid against Kentucky, but wasn't asked to do a whole lot in terms of making high-level throws vertically down the field. And I also have question marks about the South Carolina wide receiver room. Like, I think there's a lot of talent in that room. You haven't necessarily seen it kind of come to fruition. I think Mazeo Bennett, dog, true freshman, 100%. That's where this matchup kind of comes down. Like, we know South Carolina wants to run the football with Rocket Sanders and Lenore Sellers. That being said, I think LSU is going to do a decent job stopping the run and give South Carolina those opportunities to push the ball down the field. Can South Carolina hit on those opportunities? Probably the biggest question mark for me in that game.
And that's where I think you need to see Lenora Sellers really play wall to wall a really good football game, because you saw him have some good moments where he was throwing on time, making his plays in rhythm, and it looked like, okay, that's like a competent passing offense. You certainly didn't see it against Old Dominion, not for 1 second. It was like that was concerning, but obviously bounced back against Kentucky. That's how teams have been beating LSU when they've been doing it for the most part. Even Nichols, I mean, they did hit a couple big plays in the run for sure. But when they were just kind of marching, they were on time, they were accurate, they were making their plays in rhythm. And Blake Baker is going to challenge you to do it. That's been one, I think, key difference from the Blake Baker era, from the Matt House era, is that they're challenging teams. Okay, I'm not sure LSU quite has the cornerbacks they need yet. I will say Zy Alexander is a difference maker. I think if he's in that USC game, I think that might have been a different story, because he was the one guy against Nichols who was consistently very, very much, I should say, playing great cover.
I love what LSU is doing with this defense, because that's kind of what we talked about all offseason. Like, hey, you're LSU, you're going to have like a really physically gifted defense. Go play smothering defense. That's what Blake Baker's doing, but you're seeing a little bit of an adjustment period where I don't know if they have the top end defensive backs yet to kind of sit on those islands and win those one-on-one matchups. But I also am questioning if South Carolina has the wide receivers to win those one-on-one matchups.
And can Lenora Sellers fit them into the windows? Because you saw Miller Moss was making some really good throws, and they were making plays. It's not like LSU was like busting. They were just, I mean, you big, tall wide receivers who were making good catches in traffic. I thought, again, same thing with Nichols. They were making throws into relatively tight windows. Lenora Sellers, that really hasn't been something we've seen a ton of yet. Again, made some nice throws against Kentucky, but can he consistently do that marching this South Carolina?
Two other things that I'm kind of looking at here. Big game for the backers. Like Whit Weeks, Harold Perkins, Greg Penn. I think that is like a sneaky, really good linebacker. And Whit Weeks has been phenomenal throughout even going back to last year, but it has been really, really good the first 2 games of 2024. You're going to see a lot of eye candy. You're going to see a lot of misdirection, pre-snap motion. Obviously, Lenore Sellers is going to be keeping the football plenty of times in this football game. Can you be disciplined with your run fits? And I think the other question mark is Blake Baker. This is your game to go out and win, because you look at this South Carolina offense, there's been some problems with pass protection, specifically with the communication. Like, South Carolina starting a true freshman left tackle in Josiah Thompson, who I think is really physically gifted. I think he's going to be a very good left tackle in the future. You can tell at times that he's a true freshman. A little bit lost in terms of picking up stunts, not always picking up blitzes the right way. The South Carolina unit as a whole, because they're young, they have a lot of new faces in the transfer portal. If you're Blake Baker, you're changing the picture. You're giving a lot of different looks, and you're bringing pressure from everywhere. And I think
Lenora Sellers is compounding some of those errors, frankly, because he has been fumbling the ball too much. So again, I think you saw some development in that Kentucky game where he was able to evade some rushes with clean blitzes. But you also saw, he fumbled back-to-back plays, I think, at one point in that football game. So, again, he's giving teams an opportunity to make big plays. I think that's something like LSU's obviously trying to make that part of what
that was much more on the offensive line, not picking up those big blitzes.
100% was, but you definitely, again, your offensive line has to pick it up. But there is an element of that wasn't coming off the blind side. You'd like to be able to see that and at least not fumble it, because the fumbles are what exacerbate that problem. It's okay to take a sack once in a while, but you can't fumble, and he has fumbled. I 2 or 3
Yeah, that's fair. I think the big keys for South Carolina moving the football, I think you have to win at least some one-on-one explosive plays vertically down the field. If you're LSU, I think Blake Baker's got to dominate this football game and try to, change the picture, give a lot of different looks to a young / new offensive line in an inexperienced quarterback. Dill, let's get to the pick here. 7-point spread. LSU on the road here in South Carolina, going to be a rowdy environment. And quite frankly, I don't feel great about picking against Shane Beamer after what we just saw against Kentucky. They're coming at home. I think it's going to be, again, very rowdy. Where are you going with this pick here?
I think I lean LSU just because the way LSU I think can play their high risk, high reward defense, I think probably has a better chance of working against South Carolina right now, just because you have seen some of those inconsistencies still. I think, can they be clean through a whole series of plays? That's kind of what I question for South
Because
Carolina.
you didn't really see that much against Kentucky. Like, they got a lot of short fields, obviously some defensive scores.
And then some broken plays that they made plays off of for sure.
Yeah.
So that's still my question. They really struggled to do that against Old Dominion. LSU, I think that ability to really heat it up, and I don't frankly see South Carolina being able to just smash them on the ground. And that's another thing that Nichols was able to do a little bit. Again, I still probably question what LSU has in that interior defensive line. I just don't see South Carolina being necessarily the poster child of a team
Well,
that takes advantage of it.
especially if LSU is starting to put safeties in the box. And I really do think that's how it's going to play out. Like, you're going to see a lot of cover one, which you've seen the first 2 games. Blake Baker's going to beg Lenore Sellers to push the ball down the field. And I think the question is, can Lenore Sellers and these new wide receivers, largely unproven wide receivers, make those plays vertically down the field? Dill, I'm going to go LSU too. South Carolina fans, you can feed me in the comment section because I picked against South Carolina last week as well against Kentucky. Obviously, look like an idiot. I ain't even that smart. So if you're a South Carolina fan, you're probably taking this to the bank, saying, "Oh, this dummy is picking against South Carolina again." I'm going to go with LSU because I just think this matchup favors LSU. I think LSU can come on the road. I think they can run the football. I think Blake Baker can give Lenore Sellers in this offensive line some problems in pass protection. And I just haven't seen enough from Lenore Sellers pushing the ball vertically down the field to punish LSU. That's really the only weakness that we've seen from LSU so far. How did USC move the football working vertically down the field? And so I'm going to go LSU. Don't feel great about it. Really excited to watch this football game. We'll close it out there. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.